Fire RM's secret art gallery in Seoul is every army's dream come true. Face screaming in fear, Purple Heart. Cold open, midnight to 0:30. Fast cuts. RM standing in front of a massive monochrome painting, walking through a quiet, sunlit museum hallway, a crowd of fans holding up phones outside a small gallery, in Jongyo freeze frame on RM's face, contemplative. Host, VO, intrigued, almost whispering at first. There's a version of Seoul that most tourists never see. No fan meets, no light sticks, no stadium screens. Just quiet rooms, soft lighting, and paintings that have hung on the same wall for decades. And somewhere in that world, almost every week for the last several years, you'll find BTS leader RM, standing still, staring at a canvas, completely lost in thought. Text on screen. RM's secret soul, the art world only ARMY knows about. Today we're going deep into something a lot of casual fans don't fully know about. RM's actual, real-life relationship with the Korean art world, the galleries he keeps returning to, the collection he's quietly built over almost a decade, and the massive announcement that's about to take his private passion onto one of the biggest museum stages on Earth. If you thought RM was just the smart one who reads a lot, buckle up. This goes way deeper than that. Let's get into it. Section 1. Not a literal secret gallery, but something even cooler. 0:30 to 3 o'clock. Host, VOOK. Quick clarification before we dive in, because the headline is doing a little bit of dramatic work here. RM doesn't own some hidden private gallery that nobody's allowed into. What he actually has is something arguably more interesting. An entire trail of real galleries and museums across Seoul that have become inseparable from his public identity. Places he's visited so consistently and posted about so often that fans have literally turned it into a pilgrimage. B-roll, map graphic of Seoul with pins dropping at gallery locations. It's gotten to the point where art journalists in Korea now treat RM's Seoul Art Trail as an actual travel guide category. The Korea Times recently put together a full guide for fans visiting Seoul during BTS's comeback era, specifically mapping out the museums and galleries tied to RM's personal journey, because so many ARMY members were already showing up at these exact spots, camera in hand, trying to recreate his old photos. Fans even gave this phenomenon a name, the Namjoon Tour, sometimes just called the RM Tour. It's become a real, documented travel trend. People flying into Seoul, pulling up old RM Instagram and X posts, and retracing his footsteps through gallery after gallery. Text on screen. The Namjoon Tour is a real fan travel trend. So no, there's no secret hideout with a velvet rope. But there is a real, mapped-out world of art spaces that RM has essentially turned into his second home in Seoul, and today we're walking through it. Section 2. Why this matters. RM isn't just a fan, he's a figure in the art world. 3 to 6:30. Host, VO. Before we get to the specific galleries, let's talk about how seriously the actual art industry takes RM at this point. Because this isn't K-pop idol likes museums anymore. This is a whole different level. B-roll, art fair footage, gallery openings, auction house imagery. The Korea Art Market's 2025 report named RM as one of the 20 most influential figures in the entire Korean art market, officially describing him as a passionate art collector and cultural influencer. That's not a fan magazine making that claim. That's an industry report, sitting him alongside gallerists, auction house executives, and career collectors. He's been spotted at major international art fairs like Free Seoul and Art Basel. He's built what's now described as a genuinely sizable personal collection, one that spans historic Korean modernists alongside blue-chip contemporary names like KWS and Bear Brick. He's loaned pieces to museum retrospectives before, including a sculpture by Kwon Jin-kyu that went on display at the Seoul Museum of Art back in 2022. And he's publicly documented visits to major international institutions too. London's Tate Modern, New York's Scarstedt Gallery, and Jeju's Bont Museum have all shown up in his social media art trail over the years. At one point, RM summed up his relationship to art pretty simply, saying it's become something as basic and essential to his life as eating or sleeping. And if you look at how consistently he's shown up at galleries over the better part of a decade, that doesn't feel like an exaggeration. Section 3. The gallery that started it all. Pcam Gallery. 6:30 to 10 o'clock. Host, VO alright, let's actually walk the trail. And if there's one starting point, one gallery that's become almost sacred ground in RM's art journey, it's PKM Gallery in Seoul's Jongno district. B-roll, PKM Gallery exterior, minimalist interior shots, close-ups of monochrome paintings. PKM represents the estate of Yoon Hyun-kun, a monochrome painter widely considered one of the most important figures in modern Korean art. And Yoon isn't just an artist RM likes. He's arguably RM's single biggest artistic influence. Back in 2021, BTS's own official account posted a photo of RM standing beside one of Yoon's paintings at PKM Gallery. And in 2022, RM went even further. He dedicated his entire solo album, Indigo, to Yoon Hyun-kun, including a track on the album literally titled Yoon. That's not a casual reference. That's an artist naming a song after his favorite painter and building an entire album era around that artistic lineage. Text on screen. RM's 2022 album, Indigo, was dedicated to a Korean painter. For fans walking the Namjoon tour, PKM Gallery is considered essential. The one stop that most directly traces back to RM's most personal artistic chapter. Now, a small heads up if you're planning your own visit. Yoon's next major solo exhibition at the gallery isn't scheduled until later in the year, so depending on timing, his specific works might not be on view when you go. But the gallery itself, and its connection to RM's story, remains the same either way. Section 4. Liam Museum, where RM goes to get lost. 10 to 13:30. Host, VO next stop on the trail. The Liam Museum of Art, consistently described as one of RM's absolute favorite art destinations in all of Korea. B-roll, Liam Museum's architecture, lobby, gallery halls. RM has posted photos from Liam on BTS's official account multiple times over the years. And here's a detail that really shows how deep this goes. Fans actually spotted him at Liam in early 2024, while he was still serving his mandatory military service, attending a Philippe Perrino exhibition called Voices. Think about that for a second. In the middle of his enlistment, during limited free time, he prioritized going to see a contemporary art exhibition. That's not casual interest. That's someone for whom art isn't a hobby. It's closer to a need. Liam itself is genuinely one of the most important museums in the country. Its collection includes 36 Korean national treasures and 96 additional designated treasures, alongside major modern and contemporary works from both Korean and international artists. Everyone from Kim Wang-ki and Yoon Hyun-kun to Andy Warhol and Mark Rothko. It's the kind of place where centuries of Korean art history sit in conversation with some of the biggest names in 20th century Western art. If you only have time for one museum on your own RM tour, a lot of fans and guides point straight to Liam. Section 5. MMCA, RM's most institutional connection, 1330 to 1600 hours. Host, VO. Then there's the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, MMCA, which has what's described as perhaps RM's most institutional relationship of any Seoul art space. B-roll, MMCA's Seoul branch exterior and interior, sweeping gallery shots. The MMCA Seoul branch holds a permanent collection of more than 11,500 works, and RM's ties to it go back years, including a photo posted on BTS's official account back in July 2021 showing him visiting the museum. It's also worth noting, for anyone planning a trip, that the museum has hosted major international exhibitions too, including Damien Hirst's first major solo show in Asia. Between PKM, Liam, and MMCA, you start to see the real shape of RM's art world. Not a single hidden gallery, but a whole ecosystem of spaces spanning traditional Korean treasures, monochrome painting, and cutting-edge contemporary work, all woven into nearly a decade of consistent, documented visits. Section 6. The big one. RM's collection is going to SMOMA, 16 to 2100 hours. Host, VO. OK. Now here's the part of this story that just took RM's private art world and put it on one of the biggest possible public stages. For the first time ever, his personal collection is heading to a major museum. B-roll, SMOMA exterior, exhibition announcement graphics. In October 2026, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art will open RMX SMOMA, the very first museum exhibition to ever showcase selections from RM's personal art collection. This is an RM lending one or two pieces. This is a full, roughly 200 work exhibition, combining pieces from RM's own holdings with works from SMOMA's permanent collection, running from October 3rd, 2026 through February 7th, 2027, with a special member preview running October 1st through 3rd. Text on screen, 200 works. RM's collection meets SMOMA's permanent holdings. And RM isn't just lending his name to this. He's co-curating it himself, alongside SMOMA's America Castillo and Hyeon Kim. Among the key Korean artists represented from his personal collection, Yoon Hyun-kun, of course, along with Park Ri-hyun, Kwon Ok-yeon, Kim Yoon-shin, To Sang-bom, and Chong Ukin. Those pieces will be placed directly in dialogue with SMOMA's own holdings by major international names like Kim Wang-ki, Mark Rothko, Agnes Martin, Henri Matisse, Georgia O'Keeffe, and Paul Klee. One person close to the project told the Korea Herald that RM paid particularly close attention to how Yoon Hyun-kun's work would be presented in the show, which tracks completely, given everything we just talked about with PKM Gallery and the Indigo album. In his own statement about the exhibition, RM explained that he sees the show as a reflection of the boundaries that define our era between East and West, Korea and America, the modern and the contemporary, the personal and the universal. He said he doesn't want to dictate how people should experience the works, whether they come out of curiosity or serious study, and that all perspectives are welcome. He described his hope that the exhibition could become a small but sturdy bridge for the people who visited. Text on screen, a small but sturdy bridge, RM on the SMOMA show. According to reporting from the Korea Herald, RM revealed that SMOMA had actually approached him with the offer back in late 2024, and that he was so excited, he spent a significant chunk of time just brainstorming ideas for how to approach it. He also reflected on the fact that he's been visiting museums seriously since 2018, describing his collecting process as something he built step by step over the years, and said it feels both humbling and meaningful to now be putting together an exhibition of his own. Section 7. What's actually in his collection? 21 to 2400 hours 30. Host. VO, so what does RM actually collect? Based on everything that's surfaced through the SMOMA partnership and past reporting, a pretty clear picture emerges. B-roll, close-ups of specific artworks, artist name graphics. There's a strong through line of Korean modernism. Names like Yoon Hyun-kun, Yoo Jungkook, Kim Yoon-shin, and Chong Ukin all appear across his known holdings. There's also a sculptural interest that leans towards structure and balance. Roni Horn's glass works, which explore perception through subtle shifts in color and light, have been closely associated with his collecting. Interestingly, those pieces look minimal at first glance, but visibly change as you move around them, which honestly sounds like a pretty fitting metaphor for RM himself. Photography shows up too, particularly through Hiroshi Sugimoto's long exposure seascapes. Images built around time, stillness, and horizon lines. And there's a clear affinity for artists working in grids, repetition, and quiet variation, like Agnes Martin, whose faint, measured compositions sit in an interesting dialogue with Korean Dansekwa painting, even though the two developed independently of each other. There's also a documented interest in architecture. RM has visited sites designed by the legendary Japanese architect Tadao Ando, and that spatial sensibility reportedly shapes how he thinks about placing and experiencing individual works, treating pieces less as isolated objects and more as elements in conversation with the space around them. Section 8. Why this matters for Army. 24:30, 26:30. Host. VO, so why should any of this matter to you? Even if you've never set foot in an art museum in your life. B-roll. Fans at galleries, phones out, taking photos of paintings. Because this is, genuinely, one of the more unusual crossover moments in modern pop culture. A K-pop idol's personal art collection getting a full co-curated show at one of the most respected contemporary art museums in the United States isn't something that happens often. Arguably, it hasn't really happened at this scale before. It says something about how far RM's identity has expanded beyond music, from lyricist and rapper, to one of the Korean art world's most cited influential figures, to now, museum co-curator. And for ARMY specifically, it's created this incredible, very real opportunity. You can now literally walk the same path RM walked, from PKM Gallery to Liam to MMCA in Seoul, and then, later this year, stand in front of pieces from his actual personal collection. At SMOMA in San Francisco, very few artists let their fans trace their inner world that directly. Closing 26:30, 28:00. Host, on camera or VO, so is there a literal secret gallery hidden somewhere in Seoul with RM's name on the door? No, but what actually exists might be even better. A real, years-long, publicly documented relationship with some of Korea's most important art spaces, a genuinely respected personal collection, and now, a museum exhibition on the other side of the world built entirely around his eye for art. If you're planning a trip to Seoul anytime soon, you basically have a ready-made itinerary now. PKM Gallery, Liam, MMCA, and if your travels take you to San Francisco later this year, RM x SMOMA runs October 2026 through February 2027. Text on screen. Would you go on the Namjoon tour? Let us know below, Purple Heart. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments. Would you actually plan a trip around RM's art trail? And which piece from his collection would you most want to see in person? Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Purple Heart. End screen, subscribe button, related video thumbnails. Every gallery RM has ever visited / BTS members' hidden talents you didn't know about. Memo production notes for editor. Use official museum photography from SMOMA's press kit for Section 6 where licensed. Otherwise, use text graphic recreations of quotes and facts. Keep Sections 3 to 5, the physical Seoul galleries, visually calm and quiet in pacing. Soft ambient music, slower cuts, to mirror the actual museum mood, contrasting with higher energy intro/outro. Section 6, SMOMA reveal, should have the biggest visual reveal moment in the video. Consider a graphic countdown or exhibition poster animation. Suggested runtime, 11 to 13 minutes at a natural speaking pace.